Good evening, everyone. How are you tonight? I want to try that good evening. Good evening. Good evening. There we go. Now we got it. I'm Roger Casey. I'm the president here at McDaniel, and it is my wonderful privilege to welcome you here this evening for the fourth SmartTALK event of this academic year. And during these conversations, as many of you know, we have an opportunity to catch up with some of our most accomplished alumni and to learn about the myriad ways that their liberal arts education has launched and continues to promote their careers. And I'm extremely delighted to introduce tonight's SmartTALK guest, David Moskowitz. And I would also like to welcome David's wife, Hallie, for her first visit up here on the Hill. So it's great to have you both here. If you weren't a student of the liberal arts and sciences, you might not immediately see the connection between David's undergraduate studies in political science and English and his astronomically successful and multifaceted career building the DISH network. So let me connect a few dots for you. David made the most of his time here on the campus, striking a balance between the serious attention he paid to studies and the ample time he spent with friends, including some intense backgammon matches with his roommate, Kurt Linkoff. Good to see you here tonight. He loved piecing together information that he learned in his philosophy, government, statistics, and literature classes into a completed academic puzzle. Such was his love for learning. As an active member in the Young Republican Club, David relished some lively debates with political science professor Herb Smith, who gave him the opportunity to practice making well-informed and persuasive arguments, a skill he would put to use as an attorney. No one in the class of 1980 was surprised when David was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, nor when he graduated summa cum laude. Of course, he was accepted into many of the nation's best law schools, but he accepted a full academic scholarship offered by George Washington University. He aced that program, graduating with his JD in 1983. And when he graduated from law school, he chose not to pursue jobs in the big cities loaded with lawyers like DC and New York. It was Denver that called out to him. I fast forward a few years to his career in 1990. David decided to pursue an opportunity to become the first in-house attorney of a fairly small private satellite television company producing enormous 10-foot satellite dishes that dotted the landscape. But David and the founder, Charlie Ergen, had even bigger ideas for the company's future. DISH would build and launch its own satellites from China, from the Soviet Union, and other points around the globe, allowing the company to offer viewers hundreds of channels they could receive with a dish that was only 18 inches and mounted directly on their home. Students now have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay. Because David had learned so well how to learn, he was undaunted by new technology, the formidable FCC regulations, and the complexities of navigating international trade barriers. So by 2006, he had helped to transform DISH into the third largest paid TV provider in the U.S. with about 14 million customers. Today, DISH is a $15 billion company with over 25,000 employees, and it is ready to ride the next wave of change in mobile communications. DISH is actually holding the most valuable portfolio of wireless spectrum licenses in the United States, and the company is innovating into its future. So tonight, David will share insights about how his liberal arts education propelled his success, which has included taking DISH public, doing business on 5 continents, and leading lobbying efforts in Washington, D.C., and in all 50 states. And then after his marks, based on your questions, we'll have a great conversation. So please join me in welcoming David back to campus. David.
Good evening. Thanks for that kind introduction, Dr. Casey. Thanks also, I need to say, for your vision and leadership, guiding and strengthening McDaniel through what has been a very difficult time for most small liberal arts colleges. You've done an unbelievable job. Thanks also to everyone associated with McDaniel. When people ask what led to the successes that I've had, I explain that other than my parents, McDaniel was the single most important factor in my success in life. So I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to get back here. I was a decent student in high school, but no one, including myself, would have predicted a career much beyond mediocrity. Thanks to McDaniel, by the time I left college, I felt confident that I could and would accomplish great things in life. As a high school student, I knew about careers in medicine and law and the like, but very little about thousands of other options that are out there. I'd personally like to see a dedicated course in high school or college that informs students about all the options that are available. Short of that, one of the great things about liberal arts and interdisciplinary study is the exposure I had to all sorts of areas before having to choose a major. Thanks to Dr. Smith and others, I found political science particularly interesting. Math, history, and computer programming also seemed fascinating to me, but I didn't see writing programs and compiling punch cards as a promising career path. Obviously, I was not very much of a visionary in college either. But I did enjoy current events, and the future direction of our country was important to me. I wasn't sure whether to go into politics or to become a lawyer. After a year as president of the college Republicans on campus, I decided that law was a better choice. That decision was validated later in life when I used to testify before Congress on a regular basis. I made monthly visits to Capitol Hill, managed multi-million-dollar lobbying campaigns, and that really all reminded me of the dark underside of politics that really is not something that I care to be involved in. God bless you, Dr. Smith. I added English as a second major while I was here. I actually disliked literature in high school, and I really thought it was important to correct that mistake and to learn to appreciate the classics. The second major enriched me in many ways, not the least of which was the chance to read Franklin's autobiography. His account of his attempt at perfection through the imitation of Jesus over what was initially a period of weeks, which stretched into months and then stretched into years before he finally gave up, was both insightful and hilarious. His advice to imitate Jesus and Socrates, and for me, Franklin as well, is guidance that stuck with me and inspired me throughout my life. I recommend that you each identify and research role models who reflect your highest goals and aspire to emulate them in your life. I also realize college is more stressful today than it was 35 years ago. While a college education is extremely valuable, it really no longer guarantees a meaningful career. Consequently, I'm a strong advocate for experiential learning, some of the things that Dr. Casey has started to implement here. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Now, having acquired a love for learning at McDaniel, I was fortunate enough to score well on the law school admission test and was offered admission to many of the top schools. I chose the National Law Center at George Washington because it was in our nation's capital and because they offered me a full scholarship. So they say you can never get anything unless you ask for it, but to show you just how naive a college graduate can be, I decided that, I remember I called Harvard, which had also accepted me, and I said, well, you know, these other schools have given me full scholarships, what are you guys going to do for me? You know, the silence was kind of deafening. But looking back, I'm comforted, knowing that if you go through life without risks, failures, and embarrassments, then you really haven't lived. During law school, I volunteered at a small business clinic. The work was interesting, and the experience played a key role in the decision I made to become a business lawyer. Again, back to the experiential learning. I strongly encourage you to engage in as much experiential learning during college as possible, whether Jan terms, summer jobs, or semester-long internships, or all of the above. It will help you get a better feel for career paths, give you a different perspective on your classwork, and give you great contacts for jobs after college. It can also help you identify what you don't like. I recall helping a criminal law professor who was aiding indigent clients in DC area jails. 2 visits to the Lorton Correctional Facility, and one very risky visit in a business suit to a sleazy downtown DC bar while trying to confirm an alibi convinced me that criminal law was kind of not for me. During my first year of law school, most of my classmates tried to find pro bono summer jobs to boost their resume for second-year internships in DC or New York with prestigious jobs. I decided instead that this was my last chance to have a summer without having to wear a suit. So I spent my summer hiking Alaska and Hawaii, being chased up a tree by a moose, viewing rivers so full of salmon that you could walk across them almost, and having near-death experiences hiking the cliffs of Maui. I found that discussing those experiences during interviews was as useful as a summer spent in a suit. Whether jumping out of planes or risking our company's early future on a Chinese rocket, soon as just right after one had actually blown up on the launch pad, I believe calculated risks are an important part of your personal and business growth. So I'd urge everyone to take risks that you think about and figure out whether they make sense, but you have to take risks to be successful and to grow. By my third year of law school, I knew I didn't want to work in DC or New York, where so many people were lawyers and law students. And I had visited Denver on a cross-country trip with a McDaniel buddy, actually. And seeing the snow-capped mountains of Colorado on that trip gave me one of those aha moments in life, when you just know something feels right. So 5 years after that road trip, I took my first job as a corporate and security lawyer with a big firm in Denver. Plans don't always work out the way you think, though. I've heard that the definition of insanity is continuing to hit your head against the wall even though it hurts. After 3 years at a large firm in Denver, I realized working with businesses only when they needed specialized help and billing my time in 1/10 of an hour increments was really not right for me. I thought about quitting law entirely when a mentor suggested I try in-house practice. One of the most important things you can do in a new job is to seek out seasoned pros in your chosen field. Mentors eagerly provide insights and help advance your career. Today, practicing law for a corporation is considered prestigious, but back in 1986, it was considered a step down from the big law firms. I chose to take that path less traveled anyway, and as Frost wrote, that really has made all the difference for me. I spent 3 years as a corporate and securities lawyer for a national home builder based in Denver. There I learned the value of community involvement and charitable giving from the company's founders, including a Holocaust survivor who spoke 8 languages, had a heart of gold, and remains one of my role models to this day. It's difficult to take time out of our busy lives for community and charitable causes, but I encourage each of you to find the time to do that. It's the right thing to do, and it feels really good too. Gaining friendships and business contacts along the way is really just kind of icing on the cake. So after 3 years at that job, a mutual friend suggested in 1989 that I meet with the founder of this relatively small satellite television company in Denver. And walking into their offices for my first interview, I had another one of those aha moments in life. Creativity and business possibilities just filled my head. During that interview, I actually had an interview with the founder of the company, and we actually argued and exchanged pretty unseemly adjectives about each other. Now, I don't really recommend that as an interview technique for most, but my willingness to defend what I knew was right and back it up with logic got me that job and has kept me there for over 25 years and counting now. Now, along the way, I've traveled the world as our team built Dish Network and EchoStar into a pro-consumer company, inventing cutting-edge technologies to challenge the largest media conglomerates in the world. We grew from 300 employees to almost 30,000 with over $15 billion of revenue. I've negotiated deals with Chinese, Russian, and other governments and agencies across the world for more than 20 satellites, each costing over $300 million to construct and launch. I've been fortunate to meet and eat with locals and attend satellite launches in regions of China, Kazakhstan, South America, and the South Pacific, rarely seen by outsiders. I've supervised legal, human resources, PR, marketing, customer relations, content acquisition, and other business units. I've negotiated with Wall Street banks to raise over $20 billion over the years. I've helped chart strategy and assist as we pivot now, investing billions more in new cutting-edge opportunities as our core business starts to decline. Most importantly, by the time I was 45, I was able to step back from the day-to-day business and ride bikes to school with my kids. I've observed that to succeed in life, you need both skill and you also need luck. Thomas Jefferson is quoted as saying, "The harder I work, the more luck I have." And that principle has been recognized since long before Jefferson, and it's pretty simple, really. The harder you work, the more options you create for yourself. And the more options you create, the more decisions you get to make for yourself, rather than having to accept the only available option. Luck seldom strikes those who wait for it. You have to put yourself in a position to get lucky. At Dish, if we want to consider growth through acquisition, we might look at 20 companies, recognizing that only one might be the gem that we ultimately purchase or make sense for us. Similarly, we never rely on one path to meet an annual or 5-year business plan. We invest time in multiple options so that as circumstances change, we're never left with a dead end. We create our own luck. I tell my kids that beyond luck, there are 5 keys to success in life and business. At the top of the list is hard work. I've heard this described by successful people in a number of ways. Thomas Edison said genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Putting that in terms a little more familiar to college students, when achieving your goals is more important than Johansson's, welcome to the 1% Club. Now, I was known for regularly keeping Wall Street bankers and lawyers up for 48 to 60 hours straight to close critical deals. The only break would be at about 8 p.m. each night when I would go into a separate office to read bedtime stories to my kids over the phone. Hard work played a big role in my success, and I've seen it play in the success of others as well. Most importantly, anyone is capable of doing it. You don't need to be the most intelligent student in the class in order to get the best grade, and you don't need to be the most intelligent business person in order to be the most successful and achieve great success. The peculiar thing is that so few people are willing to work hard and passionately. So those who do are typically very successful. As a bonus, when you work that hard for a sustained period of time and achieve your goal, you experience an exhilaration that rivals a runner's high. The feeling of accomplishment and confidence is worth every bit of the hard work and sacrifice required. Of course, students know the importance of hard work. I'm sure most of you have pulled an all-nighter to cram for a test. But an all-nighter is not enough. By hard work, I mean the working world equivalent of sustained effort above and beyond in every class for an entire semester. When you can do that, you guarantee yourself that you're going to accomplish whatever you want in life. 2 things happen. First, instead of merely memorizing the material, you learn at a much deeper level. Plus, you'll probably experience one of those kind of aha moments in life when learning becomes fun. That's what happened to me at McDaniel. And when it became fun, you want to learn not just in college, but in life, which is, of course, kind of the heart of a liberal arts education. Keep in mind that hard work is about much more than putting in hours, though. It's about finding ways to work smart. If you read the same passage repeatedly but don't fully understand it, don't keep hitting your head against the wall. Try some different learning techniques. I can suggest many to you. Now, most of you will end up in positions where it's impossible for you to do it all yourself. Learn to work smart in college, and it will serve you well in your career. So, the absolute biggest key to success is working hard and focused for sustained periods. My second key is the 3 Ps: passion, pride, and personal integrity. Now, it's a common mantra among millennials that if you do what you love, success will follow, right? Everybody's kind of heard that. I believe the phrase is overused. The problem is that with respect to career, passion rarely finds you. You need to cultivate it. So how does that happen? Perhaps you'll be lucky enough to take up a hobby that becomes a passion and a career, but for most that really isn't going to happen. There really isn't much room left for another successful craft beer brewer. So, the good news is there's one almost sure way to find a passion that's often overlooked, and that's just plain commitment. I find the more often I do something and take the time to do it with pride, whether in sports, study, or career, the more confident I become. And that hard work and confidence breeds success. And these good feelings often cause you to love what you're doing. I didn't start practicing law knowing I would love it, but I grew to love it as I got good at it and realized I could make a difference using the skills I had learned. So I think the fascination today with finding the thing you love is really a bit overrated. Don't worry if you're a junior or a senior concerned you haven't yet found your passion. I encourage those who typically just kind of skim the surface to take some deeper dives in life. You'll find the water is the perfect temperature once you get used to it. Set goals and work hard to achieve them. You will often find that you come to love what you're already doing. The second P, pride, means taking the extra time so you produce the best work product possible. I get lots of resumes and cover letters with typos or grammatical errors. I don't reject them out of hand merely because they aren't perfect. But I do reject them because I want to work with people who take pride in what they do. And those who don't take the time to send error-free resumes don't really practice pride. Some of you may have read about former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. When Kissinger's new aides provided a policy paper, he would scribble, "You can do better," and give it back to them. After receiving the revised submission, he would write, "Not your best work," and give it back to them again. Only on the third submission did he actually read what they'd written. Take the time to produce the best that you can, and you'll differentiate yourself and be successful. The third P, personal integrity, has always been important to me. But I understand its importance better today than when I started in my career. So I hope you all do a better job of keeping it front center from the start. I can tell you that impressions last. Those whom I felt were ethical in college and law school, I still think of honest today, however many years later. Those who were less so, I still think of in that vein, though they may well have improved over time. So I've papered up thousands of complex merger, acquisition, joint venture, supply, and other agreements worldwide. Though they all need to be properly reflected, I can often predict up front which ones will end up in litigation or going south based on the character of the team across the table. My moral compass is pretty simple. Don't do anything you'd be embarrassed to tell your mother. Right? With few exceptions, if you live life with that in mind, you'll feel good about yourself at the end of the day. So that's the 3 Ps, the second key to success. I'll come back to the third key in a minute, but I first want to jump to number 4 and 5. In order of importance, I would say they are common sense and intelligence. So out of the 5 things that make you successful, intelligence is important, but it's the least important of the 5. And that's really all I have to say about that. My third key to success, though, social skills and interaction, deserves a lot more discussion. It's more important to success than either common sense or intelligence. Perhaps you've heard the old adage that the A students end up working for the B students. I can tell you this is often true. People want to give jobs to and do business with those they know, like, and trust. College is an amazing place. It offers a unique opportunity to make lifelong friends. Only in college are you living day and night so close to so many people with whom you have so much in common. Take advantage of the opportunity. Cultivate as many deep friendships as you possibly can. My best memories of McDaniel revolve around friendships, sledding down hills on cafeteria trays and blizzards, posting daily. You guys don't have cafeteria trays anymore. I think they took them away after we did that. Posting daily jokes on dorm room doors, all-night philosophical discussions, and beer bashes in the quad. You don't do that anymore either. Even hitchhiking and camping through a snowstorm during spring break brings a smile to my face, having shared the experience with friends. Beyond friendships, treat everyone you meet as a unique individual from whom you can learn. Even complete jerks can tell you how not to act, and even they usually have positive traits you can find and appreciate if you try. But the social skills that help you succeed in business actually go beyond those things. Get to know as many people as you can. 2 of the 3 jobs I've had in my career were the result of people I knew going out of their way to introduce me to employers because they liked me and respected me. Life can be so busy that I often find myself avoiding interaction with others because it takes time I just don't have. But 2 minutes of face-to-face interaction is worth 10 or 20 minutes on social media. Get to know people. Stop by and chat with every one of your professors just to get to know them. It's interesting. Yesterday, my wife and I were kind of finding our way around campus, and we looked lost and confused, and Dr. Leitner came up to us. Where's Dr. Leitner? There he is. Dr. Leitner came up to us. He didn't know who I was, just came up and started chatting with us. That's the way I think everyone should approach life. Every person you meet is an opportunity to know someone else and learn something from them. In your summer jobs, introduce yourself to all the full-time employees whom you can. Ask about their career paths. 9 out of 10 will appreciate you making the effort, and you'll learn a lot and make a lot of contacts that could help you later in life. So in closing, I encourage you to work hard, engage in as much experiential learning as possible, and take time for friendships and business contacts. To quote Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. Thanks for inviting me back to the Hill, a place of wonderful memories, always.
So you've given us some really good advice, David, and I'm going to start with one of the big questions from the audience. So tell us about something you really screwed up, and what did you learn from this?
Wow. Something, you know, I think a lot of people's minds, including mine, are kind. They try to hide and do away with the things you've done wrong. What have I really screwed up? There have been a lot of them, but honestly, I couldn't tell you what they are today.
So a lot of people want to know about satellite television, so I'm going to ask you a really very liberal arts question here. So can you explain to us how...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll tell you one thing I screwed up.
Okay, great. All
I'll tell you one thing I screwed up.
I knew it would come.
I was testifying in front of a congressional committee, and we were in a pretty significant battle with the broadcasters, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. And a couple of years earlier, I had been in a deposition, and they asked a question I didn't know the answer to, and I paused for a long time before I answered that question. So fast forward 3 or 4 years later, I'm in front of this congressional committee trying to tell them why the broadcasters are engaged in monopolistic behavior that's anti-consumer. And the broadcasters had fed to one of the congressmen, whom they paid a healthy sum to, a question, and the congressman asked me in front of all these people, isn't it true that in your deposition, when you were asked whether Dish Network was violating the Copyright Act, you paused for almost 1 minute before answering? And I was so taken aback that my integrity was being impugned because I had paused, that I really didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to respond by getting in this congressman's face. And in hindsight, that was a big screw up, because it was in the headlines of all the local newspapers and the industry trades. Moskowitz admits he paused for over a minute when asked whether Dish Network violated the Copyright Act, and we hadn't. But that was a big screw up, and if I had just gone with my heart and said, yes, Congressman, and I didn't know that was actually against the law, or that, that meant we'd done something wrong, things would have gone a lot better for us.
So I'm going to ask a social scientist, humanities guy, a science question, which lots of people want to know, which is, can you explain to us, how does satellite television actually work?
I can,
all right,
actually.
Great.
So the interesting thing about satellite, when we started our business, cable companies had terrible customer service, and there were outages all the time, and then you had to pay a fortune. So we saw a great opportunity to compete with them, and the way that we do that is we take the same content that they do, but instead of delivering it to people over a cable, we encode it and encrypt it with radio frequency waves and send it up to satellites 22,000 miles above the Earth, and actually 22,500 miles for those of you who are science related in the room. That's geosynchronous orbit. And in this orbit, satellites rotate around the Earth at the same speed as the Earth rotates, so that if you have a dish and you point it up in the sky, it'll always be looking at that same satellite 24 hours a day. There are other orbits, for example, the NSA and CIA have satellites that will orbit in a low Earth orbit a couple of 100 miles above the Earth, so that they can take better pictures and listen better, but they're always in a different place, so you need a bigger mesh of satellites to cover all points at all times. But in any event, so we simply beam radio waves up to the satellite, which acts as a big mirror and bounces them back down to Earth. And you configure the satellite so you can kind of think of the satellite as a flashlight. And it takes that radio wave and just beams it down, and you can shape the transmit antenna on the satellite for all sorts of ways. And we, for this purpose, shape them so that they kind of shine their light, their radio wave, down on the whole United States. And that dish you have is nothing more than an antenna that receives it. And then it goes through a satellite receiver that turns it into the signal you can see on television.
So you hear this phrase a lot, hey, I'm not a rocket scientist. But I never really thought about, truthfully, until I met you and started talking to you about your career, that it takes a lawyer to launch a rocket. And so I'm really interested in what are some of the things that you actually do as you get one of these satellites into space, and what are the legal aspects involved in that?
Right. So it's interesting. Not many people know, but there's really a United Nations of space. So all the countries in the world are party to a treaty and get together periodically to divvy up space, and where individual countries are allowed to give out licenses to put satellites so that they don't bump into each other. And of course, there's a lot of law associated with how those licenses are given out. In the United States, they're auctioned off, and people have to buy those licenses. Other countries give them to the brother of the prince or whatever, and then you figure out a way to deal with those people. So beyond those regulatory issues, the Federal Communications Commission in the United States, the FCC, heavily regulates the media telecom industry, and there's always a lot that you have to do with that. But law really comes into all aspects of almost any business, whether it be the contracts that you do, or mergers or acquisitions or employment law. Unfortunately, there's legal issues that arise in almost every setting.
So tell us about some of the strategies that were involved in the development of the creation of the Dish Network.
Well, when I came to Dish Network, there were about 300 employees, and they had these big 10-foot dishes that dotted the landscape. And our founder, who's Charlie Ergen, who's really a visionary guy, believed that we could compete against the cable companies if we could launch a different kind of satellite using a different kind of radio frequency spectrum that would allow you to have smaller dishes because the signal is a lot stronger. So to do that, though, takes an enormous amount of effort, because a satellite and a launch cost somewhere between $300 and $500 million, and we didn't have that kind of money sitting around as spare change. So you have to go out and raise money, talk to Wall Street. We started out because we really believed in ourselves that we could do it. We didn't want to give away equity. A lot of companies go public in order to raise money. But we really believed in ourselves that we would be something big, and we didn't want to give away equity that would later turn out to be expensive. So we actually leveraged ourselves to the point where every dollar of revenue that we had to go to pay off that debt. And we risked everything making on a Chinese rocket, and it didn't blow up, and then all the revenue started to come in, and everything was great after that. But really, it was about vision, believing that if there's a business out there where consumers aren't happy, that there's got to be a way to find a more consumer-friendly way to do things, and it's just figuring out what that way is, and then the business will come.
So what did you and Charlie argue about then in that infamous meeting that got you hired?
I was working for another company, the second job I had, and that company was doing very well, and they were known for, throwing fancy parties, and if you were out of town, you'd stay in I stayed in the nicest hotels in New York. And Charlie was as frugal as they came, because he was trying to save every dollar to fulfill his vision of creating competition. So I was speaking to him, and he said, "You know what, I don't think you're going to work out here." And I said, "Well, okay, why not?" He said, "I just don't think that you have the right attitude. You're used to driving to the airport in limousines, and when you go out of town, you get these big fancy hotel rooms." He says, "If you and I go out of town, if we're in New York negotiating a deal, you and I are staying in the same hotel room." And then he had to take a call, and his secretary, who was listening in and had gotten to know me, came in and whispered in my ear, he's deadly serious about this. So he got off the phone, and I said to him, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." I said, "If we're going to be up for 60 or 72 hours straight, the last thing either of us need is to be sleeping in a hotel room with each other." And he said, "See, that's why it's not going to work," and then things degraded downhill from there. But he appreciated the fact that I was willing to stand up and for what I believed in and what I thought was right.
So on your first road trip, where'd you stay?
Well, it's actually a funny story. We stayed together for about 2 or 3 road trips, and this will get a little bit crude. But I decided to make it my business to eat the nastiest dinners that I could. And after about our third stay in hotels together, he saw the light, and we had separate hotel rooms after that.
Let this be a lesson to you. So you clearly struggled in the beginning, I mean, with the kind of leveraging that you had. So what were some of the real difficulties in growing this business, and who were your competitors that you were trying to take on then?
Well, our competitors were the cable companies, the Comcasts and Cablevisions of the world. The struggles were enormous. A local cable television company could give you your local ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox channel over a wire. A satellite television company, when we first started out, could do about 100 channels from a satellite. So obviously we couldn't do your local network affiliates in 210 different markets around the country. So we had to try to get legislation passed that would give us the rights to provide those channels in a different manner, and that was no easy task. It was no easy task trying to get the content providers, the Disneys and HBOs of the world, to give us content on the same terms or anything approaching the same terms as the cable companies. And of course, if we had to pay 3 times what the cable companies had to pay, then there was no way that we could be competitive. So those things were a struggle. Products were always a struggle. Those of you who are in engineering will find that as hard as you work and as much as you do, things never work out exactly the way you expect that they will. And so you'll get a product and you think it's going to be ready in 12 months, and you test it, and it's not, and that puts you behind the 8 ball. You have to be able to hire and retain the right kind of employees who share your vision. It's easy to hire people. It's a lot harder to hire people who have the kind of things that I talked about, take pride in what they do and really care about it and have a passion for what they're doing. So all of those things were struggles we had to overcome.
You mentioned the negotiation with local companies, local TV networks,
Right.
and there are a couple of people here who are kind of upset at Dish right now because the local WBAL had to get dropped and they missed their final episode of This Is Us. So how does that wind up happening, that the companies get into these situations with the local network?
Right. So over the years, when we started out, the cable companies were carrying the local networks for free. The local networks were happy just to get the additional eyeballs so that they could sell more ad time. Over time, they realized that the product that they had was as good as the products that people were paying for with Disney or others. So they started to charge, and at first that was maybe 10 cents or 20 cents a customer a month, but over time that increased. And today, a lot of the networks want $3 to $5 a month. So if I have to pay the local ABC station $4 a month and the local NBC, CBS, and Fox that much, that means that my cost just for those 4 channels is $12 a month. And consumers like their TV, but they don't like getting price increases all the time. So occasionally, and it happens to us, and it happens to DirecTV, our satellite competitor, and it happens to all of the cable companies as well today, you get into these battles when it's time to renew your contract with the broadcasters asking for ever more money, and they're now, some of them, asking for $5 or $6 a channel a month per customer. And the pushback that we give, that you're going to put us and yourselves out of business because nobody's going to be willing to pay that kind of money. And eventually everybody kind of calms down and you find the right answer in between, but unfortunately a lot of times consumers suffer in the meantime. And we actually, when these things happen, we tell our customers we'll come out, and if you're in an area where an off-air antenna will work, we'll come in and we'll put one up for you. And of course, an off-air antenna in the digital age is usually something about this big that's inside your home. And we'll put it in for you free of cost so that you're not interrupted. But of course, most people don't do that, or they don't hear about it, and unfortunately, consumers do suffer in these skirmishes.
So I don't know about you, I never imagined in my career that I would wind up doing as much lobbying and testifying as I do. And I'm curious to hear about your experiences as you found yourself doing that professionally, and how you enjoy it or not, and the successes that you've had.
I'll tell you, I really did not enjoy lobbying. And I'm glad that having stepped back from the business, that's one of the things that I don't have to do anymore. I didn't enjoy having to make the phone calls to get people to contribute. But more than that, I really didn't like what I saw in Washington. I wouldn't say that, that money buys votes, but at an absolute minimum, money buys access. So if you raise money for a candidate, they're going to let you come talk to them about whatever's important to you pretty much any time you want. And often you're able to persuade them of the logic of your perspective with respect to a piece of legislation because you spend that much time with them. So that's the diplomatic way I'll say it. But I don't like. I think Washington is broken on all kinds of levels. But one of them is the impact of money and the importance of money, where politicians, senators, and congressmen are constantly in these cycles of having to raise money, and in many senses they become beholden to the people who raise the money for them.
What about testifying? What were some of the things you were testifying about?
Well, I alluded to it earlier. Often it was with respect to our efforts to be able to gain access to these local network programming channels so that we could provide them to our customers. Now, over time, technology changed, and now we have much more complex satellites that are actually capable of using, going back to the flashlight analogy, rather than having a light that shines down on the whole country, we have one satellite that does that and another satellite that has a little beam on 80 markets and another satellite that has another 80 beams on 80 markets. And we can actually provide your local channels by satellite in every market as long as WBAL doesn't ask us for, I can't tell you how much they're asking, but too much money. I'm sorry, what was
The testifying, the things you were testifying about.
So often it would be trying to find ways to get the broadcasters to cooperate so that we could provide those sorts of channels. Other aspects of the Copyright Act, I'd have to testify. I signed a contract to launch a series of satellites from China, and there were a number of people in the government who didn't think it was a good idea that we were launching satellites from China, not because money was leaving the country, but because there was a question about technology transfers. And so I testified several times on issues of that sort as well. So all sorts of things, really.
I won't ask you about Russians, so it's okay. Other people do. The wireless spectrum, you're buying a lot of it up.
Right.
What is this the future? Where do you see the future of the network, of Dish Network?
We do. So we have a great company today. We do over 15 billion of revenue a year, and we have billions of dollars in free cash flow. But we recognize that this really is a declining business because the students who attend McDaniel today aren't really thinking about buying a home and getting a linear television service with 200 and some channels. They're probably thinking they're going to get Netflix, and maybe they've got a Roku box or a PlayStation that gets them some channels, and they're thinking they're going to be happy with that. And that television is going to change. Maybe they'd rather watch YouTube shorts than 30-minute and hour-long programs. I don't know where that's all going to turn out, but I know that our business is declining as a result. And it's not a steep decline, but there's a gradual decline there. So we saw that coming and decided that we needed to invest in the next big thing. And since we certainly knew radio frequency spectrum, we decided that the next big thing really was the radio waves that would allow you to provide the kind of services you get from your AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile or Sprint today. And we felt that you'd start to come to demand the same sort of connectivity, and this is 10 years ago, and it certainly has come to be the case more and more all the time, that you'd want the same connectivity when you're mobile that you expected in your home. That takes an enormous amount of spectrum. So we started accumulating what we felt would probably be the filet mignon of spectrum, the beachfront property of spectrum, to deliver those kinds of services. And now you're starting to see with the Internet of Things and all these connected devices, a real shortage of spectrum. And all the cellular companies today are in this great competition for consumers where they're all offering unlimited data. But the truth is that if too many of their customers take them up on this, there's no way they can provide it. They simply don't have the capacity to do it, and your spectrum's going to slow down, and those people who are streaming video won't be able to do it, just like if you go to a Ravens game and you try to send just a selfie to someone else, it takes 5 minutes to go. And that kind of slowdown, because there's so many people trying to use their phones at the same time, is going to occur on a broader scale. And so we've put ourselves in a position to acquire more spectrum than anyone's ever amassed for this sort of purpose, and we think that that's probably going to be a good bet for us over time.
You've been an extraordinary jack of all trades in your career, and if you look back from where you are now, educationally, do you think you would have still gone to law school? Would you have majored in political science and English? If you could replay, are there some different choices you might have made?
First, I'd say that I'm incredibly fortunate, and so, how could I change anything? I mean, I've had a fantastic career, a fantastic wife, a great family, 4 kids who have done great things. So it's hard to think of a reason why I would do anything different if I could. That said, a lot of people say that you learn a new way to think in law school, and that really didn't happen for me. College was one of those aha moments where I really loved it and I just ate up everything I could. I didn't think law school was as intellectually stimulating. So, maybe I would have done something else, but, I have very few regrets in life. We all try to live our lives with as few regrets as possible, and I don't have many.
So if somebody's sitting here and they're thinking, I kind of like to be that guy career-wise, and realizing that the majority of your career has been spent in the business world, would you tell them, go to business school? Would you tell them to go to law school? Would you tell them, don't go to either one, go to work? What would be your best advice?
I tell them to go to work after college. If you don't love the law, I think law is a bad choice for you. I think there are a lot of lawyers out there, there are a lot of doctors out there, there are a lot of MBAs out there who really don't like what they do. And, I think it's great today that very few people go straight from college and get their MBA. They work for a couple of years now. That's the way most people do it. And I think that's a great thing to get some better perspective before you decide what the next step is. I think that college is more difficult today, as I said during my remarks, because it used to be that as long as you went to college and you did well, you'd find a job. I think today students need to be more cognizant of thinking about where they're going to go and what they're going to do, and choosing a major that helps you do that. So, advising my kids today about college, I told them that I thought they should find something they like, but things like computer science and business were areas that I saw when they were going to college as areas that there was going to be growth and a lot of jobs, and I hope they'd at least take a look at those and see if they made sense for them. I think students today just need to be a lot more cognizant of identifying what they're going to do after college and preparing themselves for that in college.
So one of our students is interviewing with you for a job, and let's assume they're technically qualified. That's not the issue. Can you give advice on what are you looking for on paper that might make them stand out? And then when they're sitting in that interview with you, what are you listening for when they talk to you?
Sure. So I think every company has different things that they're looking for. In our company, we look for three things: pride, a spirit of adventure, and a winning attitude. And so we want to see people who take pride in what they do, and we call that PAW. And we want to see people who take pride in what they do in every aspect of their life. We want to see people who have an adventurous spirit. Maybe they've traveled, maybe they've done something else, but show that they want to do more than just go to college, find a job, that there's more to them. They're multifaceted, multidimensional. And winning, and often that's reflected in having been part of a team sports program, but there's lots of other ways that you can exhibit a winning attitude. But really, those are the sorts of things, together with common sense, that we look for. If you have common sense, you can kind of figure out almost anything. And we like to do that. We like to put people in jobs they're not comfortable in and help them to grow and kind of mentor them to be able to move forward in the organization.
How critical do you think students having had multicultural or international experiences is to their being at the edge in terms of the hiring you're looking for?
Well, I think international experience can be a sign of an adventurous spirit, but not necessarily. So it really depends on the position that you're hiring for. I'm not sure what you mean by a multicultural experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, having had experience living in other cultures, being part of that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see. Again, I think it can be part of an adventurous spirit, but unless we're hiring somebody to work in one of our international offices, that's the only piece of it that would differentiate you.
So, taking your vision and maybe leaping forward 20 years, where do you see the company that you've spent so much of your life building?
Well, it's hard to say. I told you that I think everyone should, and we try to have multiple options. So I'd say 20 years from now, our today's core business, the satellite television business, is going to be smaller than it is today. It might not even exist 20 years from now. It's a bit hard to tell. And I don't know where we will be as a company. It's possible that we will be providing a service that's in direct competition with the Verizons and AT&Ts of the world, and you'll have a dish cellular device. It's possible that we'll acquire a cellular provider today to get into that business. It's possible that we'll simply lease our spectrum to those folks so that they can provide a better service. And really, it will all be dependent on what's the best economic result at the time for our shareholders. And if I did know exactly where we were going to go, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But really, the idea is to keep as many options available as possible so that as circumstances change, you can react to them.
You've given some great advice tonight to our students here. I'm wondering if you've got some good advice for the president of your alma mater. What do you think we need to be doing as a university to be as on the cutting edge as your company has been?
Okay. Well, I think there are a couple of things. So, first of all, I think we need to replace those old desks around campus. Right? I mean, we have an unbelievable, beautiful, fantastic campus. I've been telling people, I have 4 kids that, 3 still in college, 1 who's graduated, and I've visited somewhere between 50 and 100 different universities and colleges around the country with them, trying to help them make their choice. And when I came back to McDaniel, I was so impressed with our facility and what we have here. It's an incredible facility, but we've got to replace those desks. That's number 1. Number 2, I think we need to have more experiential learning. I really believe that we need to give our students a better step up when they leave and go to try to find a job. And I think the best thing that we can do for them is provide more experiential learning. So I would love to see programs where we actually have official programs where students take a semester sabbatical and go to work for a company in their chosen field, because it's so valuable to them in terms of making business contacts for a future job and getting a different perspective on why they're sitting in the classroom learning. So I think, you've obviously done a fantastic job starting an experiential learning program here, and I'd really like to see that expanded. I think that's something that we could do to really stand out amongst small liberal arts schools. I'd love to see us do more of that. On a big picture basis, I really wish colleges and universities, I mean, the cost of a college education is crazy today. And I'd have a different paradigm, and a lot of tenured professors aren't going to like what I'm about to say. But really, I think that there should be more collaboration amongst institutions. And if Leroy Panic is the absolute best professor in English, then his lectures, and he's the best at reaching out and touching students and getting them excited about learning that material, that he should be recorded and he should be licensed out to other institutions. And that's and rather than have their professor do it, who's good but not great, that's the professor who should be teaching them. And that should happen on a very broad basis. And I think that would be a way for colleges and universities to control costs and provide a better educational experience for students. Now, I'm not Pollyanna. I don't think that's really going to happen. But if you ask me, on a real broad basis, what I think should happen, that's what I think should happen.
You heard it tonight, the launch of our own dish channel. That's right here. Well, I think we've had a marvelous time learning and listening from your experiences. Your alma mater is incredibly proud of all that you've achieved, and I want to see if everybody would join with me giving a huge round of applause to David Moskowitz. And we know you proudly have a Western Maryland degree, but I really think you need a McDaniel one to hang on your wall to go along with it. So, David, thank you so much for being here. Thank all of you for being here. We've got a lot more events this summer. Please, this spring, if we ever get to spring. And please, so come back, grab yourself a copy of McLive so you know what's going on campus. Connie's in the back at the Center for Experience and Opportunity, and she can give you all kinds of information. And we really appreciate your spending your evening here. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.